Halloween traces its roots deep into Celtic antiquity, with the festival of Samhain as its progenitor. In the lands of ancient Ireland, Scotland, and other parts of what is now Britain, Samhain marked the end of the harvest and ushered in the darker half of the year, a liminal time when the boundary between the worlds of the living and the dead was thought to be thinnest. In her work, Trick or Treat, A History of Halloween, author Lisa Morton notes, the Celts believed that the doors between this world and that other world opened one night a year, at Samhain, of course. On that night, the dead returned to the living, and creatures called Sidhe or fairies cross over to bedevil humans. During Samhain, communities extinguished their hearth fires and kindled new communal bonfires. Offerings of crops or livestock might be sacrificed or burned to appease spirits and ensure protection in the coming winter. The festival was also a time of prophecy and divination, with the belief that supernatural forces were more active and augury more potent. According to the work Halloween from Pagan Ritual to Party Night by author Nicholas Rogers, he writes, to ward off spirits, the Irish built huge, symbolically regenerative bonfires and invoked the help of the gods through animal and perhaps even human sacrifice. Tracing Halloween's development in the British Isles after the mid-17th century is quite a burdensome task. You see, much of what survives comes from folklore rather than direct historical record. These fragments don't always reveal how the festival truly evolved, nor can they be taken as timeless relics of a pre-industrial past. Still, if we look hard enough, we do see that a few trends and patterns emerge, some of which we still adhere to and exhibit to this day. The first trend, if you will, is the old practice of mummery, which is believed to have taken place across Britain since the 14th century. Traditionally, actors, known as mummers, were seen to dress up as various characters and would perform plays and well-known routines in local villages. According to a Treasury of British Folklore by author D.D. Chainey, the practice would see the likes of St. George reimagined by actors, who would slay another actor dressed up as a Turkish knight known as Slasher. In other areas, a routine involved a quack doctor appearing to restore life to the dead, as well as cameos from Father Christmas, people dressed up as animals, and even the demon Beelzebub himself. At Halloween, however, this tradition of dressing up and performing was known as souling, or soul caking, and would involve mummers going door to door to sing for soul cakes. Soul cakes were traditionally spiced biscuits that resembled shortbread, and were the customary gift one might give to a mummer should they have appeared on one's doorstep. In exchange for such patronage, the mummer wouldn't just sing for you, but would pray for the deceased with the promise that upon receiving a soul cake, it would surely help any lost souls who happened to be stuck in purgatory. It's believed that this tradition served as the precursor for what we now know as trick-or-treating. Mummers of this variation were believed to be less fortunate, and souling might be seen retrospectively as merely a fancy form of begging. Indeed, they were believed to be poor, as is told to us in Nicholas Rogers' work. This food was conventionally distributed to all relatives and poor neighbours who offered to pray for the souls in purgatory, underscoring the belief that prayers and ritual practices could smooth or speed a soul's passage to heaven. This was echoed as late as 1952, when the American Friends Quaker Service Committee suggested transforming Halloween into a friendly beggar's night, where trick-or-treaters would collect practical items for poorer children, such as food, clothes, books, and games. In fact, in the wealthy suburb of Grosse Pointe in Michigan, the door-to-door greeting was not trick-or-treat, but rather simply and honestly, help the poor. Halloween's mummery, this act of soul-caking if you will, had quite the staying power in history, where it was even known to transpire as late as the 20th century. In the Shetland Isles, it is believed that young men dressed up in creative costumes made of animal skin or straw, and that they went from house to house, singing, dancing, and begging for patronage. Similar conventions existed in the Irish town of Mulligar, according to Rogers' work Halloween from Pagan Ritual to Party Night. where he notes that one witness told the Irish Folklore Commission of the 1940s, young people sometimes dressed up in strange garments, the boys going as girls, the girls as old men or women with masks or faces, perhaps a bit of flour bag or calico with slits for eyes, nose and mouth, the beard and brows drawn with boot polish, window curtains or veils and the like. A little band of them goes from one neighbour to another, never far from home. One member may have a mouth organ or the like. They go into the kitchen and dance a half set, play music and come out. They don't seek money or food, but if an apple were handed them, they'd take it, or a few nuts. In some schools of thought, the practice of dressing up in such a manner originated from the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain, where people would don eerie attire in an effort to ward off or disguise themselves amongst the spirits, those who were, as aforementioned, believed to be plentiful on the earth during this season of Hallowtide. Now this might all sound like frivolous fun and games, but not all house visits during this time were entirely innocent. It was not unheard of for townsfolk to adopt the guise of mummers to lull people into opening their doors, and when they did, a manner of tricks and deceptions were played on the unsuspecting victim. Mimicking the malignant spirits that were believed to haunt the air during this time was also a common practice, though instead of scaring off spirits as they were traditionally believed to do, scaring other people became more of the practice pastime. Rogers notes of other forms of mischief transpiring around this time, including gangs of youths blocking up chimneys, rampaging vegetable patches, and conducting general vandalism. Author Lisa Morton seconds this by telling us that in the British town of Lewes in 1779, an attempt to curb the festivities by banning Halloween bonfires was outrightly rejected when revelers threatened to burn down houses instead. The bonfires were therefore allowed to continue. In another Irish custom, Morton tells us of those who would dress up in distinctive suits made of white straw and tall conical hats. They would present themselves as straw boys and would engage in petty vandalism, usually targeting families who had kept their daughters away from the company of boys. Witch hazing also became a known practice in some areas of Scotland, where revelers were believed to seek out lone women whom they could then harass as a witch. Rogers tells us that on the island of Cole, great liberties were taken in the way of stealing, something also echoed as late as the 1940s in Ireland, where considerable damage was believed to have been committed during the Halloween season. Here it was also believed that if someone was not well liked within the Irish community, their property could be marked for quite the hazing, with their person being reconstructed as an effigy and then being burned right there in front of their house. According to the work British Calendar Customs by author MacLeod Banks when talking about Scotland, if an individual happened to be disliked in the place, he was sure to suffer dreadfully on these occasions. His door would be broken and frequently not a cabbage left standing in his garden. Though women sometimes joined the festivities in masks, Halloween was largely a night of male camaraderie and mischief. Yet within the home, the tone shifted toward romance and divination, and tended to focus upon the dreams and desires of young women. In his work, Halloween, Folklore and Ghost Stories, author Brice Stratford tells us that one Halloween tradition includes lighting a candle and sticking pins down its length for each eligible suitor. The candle burning down from pin to pin will go out when it reaches the right pin, indicating which suitor the woman ought to marry. Another ritual indicates that a woman should go out into the garden at midnight on Halloween and find sage. From there, the woman should pluck one leaf at each stroke of the clock up to a total of 9. If done correctly, the face of one's future husband will appear. However, should the woman have seen a coffin instead, then it would mean that she would die alone. In a Treasury of British Folklore by author D.D. Chainey, all one needs to do to catch a glimpse of their future husband is to light a candle in the mirror on Halloween night. Lawyer and agriculturalist William Ayton remarked of Halloween in Ayrshire, Scotland at the turn of the 19th century, many spells were then used to discover matters of futurity, particularly respecting marriages. many of the lower orders in that country still believe the devil is ready at their call, and on their using certain capers and spells to discover a secret which generally occupies much of their thought, namely, who is to be their future spouse. Author Nicholas Rogers believed these divinations, as they were a crucial part of the mating process in the late 1800s and early 20th century, where it was in larger festive settings such as Halloween that young men and women contemplated potential marriage prospects, and either consolidated or either broke off courtships in rather public settings. What's more, he tells us that it was during times like Halloween that youngsters would try to channel their sexuality into more permanent, tangible unions with those who they fancied. This was even believed to be the case as early as 1784, where in a publication known as the Gentleman's Magazine, the ritual of Nutcrack Night was mentioned, where we are told, the young folks amused themselves with burning nuts in pairs on the bar of the grate, or among the warm embers, to which they give their name and that of their lovers, or those of their friends who are supposed to have such attachments, and from the manner of their burning and duration of the flame, draw such inferences respecting the constancy or strength of their passions, as usually promote mirth and good humour. According to the Book of Halloween by author Ruth Edna, at Halloween supper, a dish called Colcannon could be prepared, consisting of mashed potatoes, parsnips and chopped onions. A secret ingredient was a ring buried inside the mashed potatoes. He or she who found the ring in their portion would be married in a year's time, or if they were already married, would experience tremendous luck. Whilst nuts and mashed potatoes have their place in Halloween history, no food has secured its place as being synonymous with Halloween as the apple. Such an association likely dates back to the Celts and, once more, the tradition of Samhain, given that apples ripen in October and thus were likely plentiful at Samhain feasts. Author Lisa Morton tells us of an 1844 journal article that mentions the game of bobbing for apples being formerly common, suggesting that it was a popular Halloween activity much earlier than the 19th century. Interestingly, the poem Halloween, written in 1785 by poet Robert Burns, by which many historians look to gain perspective about Halloween, doesn't mention apples at all. Yet his contemporary Janet Little mentions the activity Snap Apple in another poem, a risky game that saw an apple placed on one end of a suspended stick and a lit candle at the other. The stick was then spun and players had to get a bite of the apple, whilst avoiding getting a bite of hot wax. The game was so popular that in some areas, Halloween itself was renamed as Snap Apple Night. Author Lisa Morton makes note that bobbing for apples was indeed a popular pastime in Britain for at least 400 years, so it's interesting that antiquarian John Brand only mentions it as late as 1810, and suggests that it was limited only to the north of England, where he tells us, "It is customary on this night for young people in the north to dive for apples, catch at them when stuck onto one end of a kind of hanging beam, at the other extremity of which is fixed a light candle, and that with their mouths only, having their hands tied behind their backs, and many other fooleries." Determining exactly what Halloween might have looked like in the past hinges upon a variety of factors: the strength of spoken word, the regional attitudes, and the religious culture at that point in time. There is little evidence that the holiday had achieved the uniformity it would in 20th century North America. It certainly seems that you could visit a village not 20 minutes away and find them celebrating or not celebrating Halloween in a completely different way from wherever you had come from. Ultimately, when it comes to the history of Halloween, we can only be sure of a few things: that it was influenced by both pagan and Christian roots, that it marks the beginning of winter, and that the combination of its historic joyful harvest feast and its impish merriment have given it a raucous side, where it has since been observed with shenanigans and mischief. As always guys, if you've enjoyed today's episode, then don't forget to leave this video a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more content just like this. Until next time.